Well, hello and welcome to a very special weekend debate. We've got the great and the good with us this week. I think that's a good way of putting it. And I'll get everyone to introduce themselves as usual. Making a return, first of all, Mr. Shea.
Alan Shea here, known for the outfit I wore on Timberwolf Day and fighting for gay rights for gay men to make it legalised on the Isle of Man.
You were last here, we were talking about Pride, and you said that you weren't going to do much more media, and this might be it again. I keep saying that, but you never know.
Just for a couple of months I'll get my health
Yes.
sorted out, yeah.
Okay. Well, and good luck with that.
I won't be that quiet. If something upsets me, I will speak out.
Of course, Peter.
I'm Peter Tatchell, director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation, and I was involved in Outrage, the LGBT direct action group based in London, which came over in 1991 to support Alan when he made his historic challenge to the anti-gay laws in the Isle of Man.
And last but not least, as they say on all the good chat shows.
Yeah, I'm Allen Bell, retired Chief Minister, and now a pensioner of this parish.
And one who doesn't come out very often to do interviews, by the way, should be stated.
Not a lot, yes.
A little bit of pressure, nothing too much on this one. Okay, so we're obviously talking about gay rights here in the Isle of Man and what's going on. So I thought, first section, let's look at the past. And going back to the 80s. Now, that would be 84 for you when you became an MHK, but you were active in local politics before that, weren't you?
Yes, I was a Ramsey Commissioner for 7 years before I went into the Keys, and I was elected to the Keys at the end of 1984. And my involvement with gay rights started really fairly shortly after that, because I'd only realised after I got elected that the Isle of Man had not become party to the European Court of Human Rights, and Manx people were denied the right of individual petition. And the only thing which was preventing the Isle of Man signing up to the European Court of Human Rights was the fact that homosexuality was still a criminal offence over here. So my very first motion to Tynwald after I was elected was actually to try and get the Isle of Man to sign up again to the Court of Human Rights, which then would have led on to the decriminalisation. And sadly, I lost that vote by one vote that day.
But you didn't go in there saying it's just for legalising homosexuality. You just kept it more general, did you, in that sense?
When I was first elected, yes. I mean, you don't go in on a single issue in an election. You get elected on a range of issues. But this was an issue obviously very close to my heart. And I thought I could do something quickly by restoring the right of individual petition, but sadly that didn't work out. But from that flowed pressure from the UK. We had, because at that time the Isle of Man had a very busy tourist industry, particularly conference business. But because of our stance on the European Court, unions started boycotting the Isle of Man. And a lot of very big unions which brought their conferences to the island, boycotted it, and we lost thousands of visitors over that period. And alongside that, the UK government started to show an interest in it and were threatening to legalise and legislate over our heads if we didn't take steps ourselves. And that all led up then to the 1989, 1991 period.
But there was a Nalgo, wasn't it? They did a demonstration.
I
arrived on the Isle of Man in 1983, and Nalgo did a demonstration along the promenade, shouting for gay rights, which I've got a photograph on Facebook now from the union. So Nalgo did a little march, all the union people went down the prom.
This is just after you arrived in the Isle of Man?
Yeah,
alarm bells ringing then?
No, I didn't know, see, because that already took place before I arrived, so, and then someone mentioned it, so I went researching and I found the photograph.
Right. We'll come back to more about the Parliament and the pressures, but let's, you turn up here not knowing what the situation is either, by the sounds of it.
In 1983, myself, Stevens Manx, I'm a Scouser.
No.
We came here, but I, under the delusion, being stupid and naive, I was a young guy anyway, thinking the Isle of Man was part of the United Kingdom, because probably many people may have thought that anyway. And I thought the law would be the same as it was in the UK, so there's me doing what you gay men do, and then find out that it's against the law.
But was there an active network? You didn't think you weren't being pushed into toilets or anything particularly, or more than anywhere else.
I never did that thing anyway. I did the club scene. That's where I met my partner.
Yeah.
And we've been together about 38 years. And, but I just thought it was just basically like the United Kingdom. I was in Liverpool, so I presume it'd be the same here. It's legal. You can have your relationship. You can have sex, and then to find out that, and when Hazel brought the bill in, that the government introduced to bringing in to legalise it.
Could I just add in that although a lot of people thought the 1967 Act legalised homosexuality in England and Wales, in fact it was a very partial, limited decriminalisation, and the years after 1967, the number of gay and bisexual men convicted actually rose by 400%. The police cracked down on the remaining aspects of illegality with ever greater resolve. And in fact, full decriminalisation of homosexuality didn't happen in England and Wales until 2003.
Wow.
Yeah, so
I mean, we thought we were a bit behind here, but I mean, it was complete. What were the laws? I mean, completely illegal for absolutely ever. Then it was over 21s, wasn't it?
but homosexuality was never against started. Only this, everyone, even the police, used this all the time on the Isle of Man. That it was against the law. It was never against the law. Only the sexual act was against the law. And by saying that, even the police said on TV, and it's in the museum for people to see, it's on YouTube, people can see it, the police clearly say if anyone broke the law, they will arrest them. I confess on these interviews that I've been having sex every day. They did not arrest me. Why have this barbaric law in those days then? Why have
I think it's also worth mentioning that the law changed in 91, 92, but up until then, having sex with another man still carried a life prison sentence on the Isle of Man. It wasn't just a fine or something, it was actually a life prison sentence.
And this grabbed your attention, no doubt, as things were getting easier in the UK, the Isle of Man was dragging its heels.
Absolutely. We were really shocked to discover that the Isle of Man was not included in the English legislation. Obviously, you have a different jurisdiction, but I think a lot of us did assume that, being closely associated with the UK, that the laws would automatically transfer to the Isle of Man. So when we heard they hadn't, and there was still this maximum penalty of life imprisonment, we felt, well, we wanted to do something to support people here on the Isle of Man, and that's how we got in contact with Alan.
And what happened next? As they say,
Well,
was that the Simple Strange, the Simple Day thing?
No, I
was
wore
it?
the costume first on my first outing with Outrage in 1991 in Pride.
UK.
In the UK, so
Yeah.
the outfit had its first impact there. Without the three legs of man, the three legs of man were added when we came back for Timor Day, and then the three legs were added on.
Right.
And then Outrage came over the day before, the 3rd of July, I think it was. And
Then it all kicked off.
Into Main Road was, in the flats that we had. We had the CNN crew there, and they were filming us while we were talking, planning, and that was...
Let's have to do more about that in a minute. I'm intrigued about being in government, being in the closet, clearly, but there were other people rumoured to be presumably batting for the other team, and were voting not to change the laws and things like that.
Yes.
That seemed frustrating for you, that.
It was very frustrating. I wouldn't want to mention any names of people, but it was very difficult, apart from maybe one or two members, to get any traction at all about the urgency to change this legislation. There is one point, though, it's worth mentioning, and it's often overlooked here in the terms of Manx politics. Myself, obviously, I've taken a lead on these changes, Hazel Hannon and one or two other members. But one person in the early days who played a key role was actually Jim Kane, the former Speaker of the House of Keys, who was a very establishment conservative figure in most other ways. But he was one of our strongest supporters, actually, to bring about the change, bring about the legislation. And sometimes that gets forgotten, really, the role he's played in that as well.
But there's this feeling in Tynwald, we don't care, we are doing what we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the UK is not going to touch this. I mean, before that was Radio Caroline, I think, was the last time there was any sort of hoo-ha with the UK.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is always this feeling of nationalism. When the Isle of Man's under pressure, we dig in and we fight back. And that was the attitude of a lot of the politicians. No one's going to tell us what to do. We'll do what we want over here with our own laws. Unfortunately, certainly leading up to the period when I was elected, the government was largely run by farmers with a very limited outlook on life. It was a very, not just on gay rights, but on employment rights, on maternity rights and civil rights generally were actually very much at the bottom of the agenda for politicians over here.
Yeah, is this why Hazel Hannum, a woman, straight woman, had to be seen to be leading this whole thing?
Well, I mean, Hazel felt strongly about it, and Hazel and I worked together very closely on making progress with this. But it was really only Hazel, myself, and Jim, and occasionally one or two others that joined in. The majority of them didn't want to touch it initially. Even if privately they agreed with us, they didn't want publicly to go out in a small community. They didn't want what they perceived as the backlash against them for supporting a controversial measure such as decriminalisation.
But the letter we got from the UK said if the Isle of Man does not comply, they will do so at the earliest opportunity. So basically, did they vote because of the United Kingdom coming and saying, we will do this? And that means that gives them the opportunity to come in again and do other stuff.
The thing there though, it did, the pressure from the UK did actually give a certain amount of cover to some of the more hesitant MHKs at the time, that against their constituents. They could say, oh, well, we don't really agree with this, but the UK is putting pressure on us and therefore we've got to vote for it. So it's actually helped us in that respect.
But, I mean, that Tynwald Day was a game changer, wasn't it? Because the media really, the satellite channels were here, they were covering it, and this was finger in the dike by this stage, wasn't it?
It brought everything out in public, for good and for bad. I mean, there was still a strong reaction against outrage coming over, these people coming over telling us what to do. Disrupting Tynwald was considered...
Scouts are wearing a suit.
Disrupting Tynwald was considered an outrage in itself, and it actually, in some quarters, did generate a backlash, but it did bring the issue out onto the table. It started the discussion, or enhanced the discussion that was going on, and it did ultimately lead to us getting the law changed, but not without some pretty vicious debates in the House of Keys.
Let's come back to that one.
Can I just say, outrage never came over to the Isle of Man to tell people what to do.
No, that was the perception, yes.
Yeah, we came over to support Alan and other LGBT plus people and allies to support what they were doing.
Yeah.
So ours was a gesture of solidarity to support your struggle.
But what did you make of the Isle of Man and the reaction and what you were greeted with? Was it anywhere different from being in the middle of Wales or some smaller province sort of thing?
Very similar strategy and very similar result. I mean, we knew that if outrage came over here to support Alan on Tynwald Day, that it would get a lot of media coverage, and that would therefore help his cause and the cause of LGBT plus rights in the Isle of Man. Obviously, we knew the first thing you want to do is generate a debate, and so by that massive media coverage, it did increase the public debate, it did increase awareness, and it did put the authorities under pressure. And what feedback I had, that the debate was generated here on the island, and that gave a further opportunity for people like Alan and two Allens to make their case further in the media and thereby get to a wider audience.
Well, while I've seen the video, it's vicious. There's hissing from the guards on duty. There was police intransigence, shall we say, as well.
We were told once the court was fenced, even with outrage, we were told once the court was fenced, you're not allowed to say one word. And I walked from there to there, hissed all the way to the top, and witnessed by people. Again, so these people broke the fence law, which should have been dealt with, but they got away with it.
And the police, I mean, this is important because there was a mindset there, wasn't there? In general as well, you were getting...
They were there with their sunglasses, their 20 packs of sunglasses all the same. Because we watched it last night, you can actually see two of them. One policeman with their one, and the other policeman giving us the finger.
Is that on camera?
It's on camera.
Oh my gosh.
And you can actually see they're wearing the same sunglasses. It's like a job lot, you know what I mean? So.
I need to touch on, it's a sensitive subject, but people took their lives. And I know you've mentioned this before to me, and this happens everywhere, but any idea of quantifying this sort of thing that people don't even realise by having the law as it was?
No, that I'm aware of, at least 2 young people took their lives.
A bit more.
But I think there were more, but I don't know the names.
No, like Julian. I mean, Julian. I'm not being funny, but Julian, 18 years of age, interrogated by Gestapo, which I'm not being funny. I'm not being crude. The police. That's how that they operated. There wasn't pace in place. They could say what they wanted, and they did, and got away with it. They should be accountable for what they've done. And he took his own life by drinking half a bottle of vodka and shot himself.
Wow.
And that is disgusting. And that's only 30 years ago. I mean, his mum is alive today. And, you know, an apology wouldn't go amiss.
Well, there were two young people that contacted me, both in the middle of the night at home, who were threatening to kill themselves. And I spent hours and hours each time doing my best to try and talk them out of it.
The same thing, but people
so it really was a terrible time for young gay people. They had absolutely nowhere to turn. They had no support from the government, from the authorities. Don't forget, also in the middle of all this, the AIDS epidemic had just started, and there was very little recognition that Isle of Man needed to do anything to provide health support for people. So young people in particular, couldn't turn to their families often because they didn't know they were gay, had absolutely nowhere to turn. They were in absolutely desperate times for some of these young people. And I don't think that's fully appreciated, actually, just the horror stories which developed from that.
Well, can I ask you how you dealt with this? Because you were in the closet. I mean, totally. I mean, you're a politician.
I don't think Alan was in the closet.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if Alan remembers Pride '91. I was there, and I played around, and Alan was there with his partner.
Yeah.
He was in the closet. We don't have to tell people we're gay, you know.
Okay, a part-time closet, an Isle of Man closet, and in the UK, wave your hands in the air like you don't care.
I think, I mean, I have friends in London, and I used to use that as my bolt hole every so often, just to get a balance in my life again, separate from what I had to live through here. My current
your partner, let's get it right.
We've been together 27 years, so
wow.
So that started sort of at the end of that period, but it was very difficult. So you have to try and lead this double life, really, which is really frustrating because you really can't be yourself. You can't be open with people.
The gay community, not being familiar, the gay community knew Alan was gay, but it wasn't up to us to say anything. He's not offended us, so he was fighting for our corner, and so was Hazel Hannon. So, you know.
But it's a big decision when to say it. I mean, we did interviews, we skirted around this thing many times. I remember. I thought, well, you're not going to say it. And then you went to the Guardian, or the Guardian came to you, or something.
Guardian
dropped it in as a sort of, by the way, and then it was all, here we go, you know.
Well, I mean, that was almost at the end of the journey, really, because, as I said, my first resolution to Tynwald was in relation to the European Human Rights Convention, but my last one was gay marriage. And so the Guardian came over to see me about the bringing in of the law to change a law rather on gay marriage, and that came up in the conversation there.
Yeah.
But as I said in the conversation to Helen Bidder with the Guardian, up until that point, no one had ever asked me. So if they don't ask me, why am I going to tell them?
It's your private life, and I don't think it's a line that should be crossed.
And what difference does it make to anyone at all? Anyway, it doesn't make any difference.
No.
And I felt I could do an awful lot more good by acting the way I did, by over a period of years changing the legislation and opening up the lives of so many young people.
Okay, well, let's deal with that. That's for the past bit, this section. How did things go after Tynwald Day? I mean, how was that traction and the speed of change?
Well, I think the legislative the legislation was in the programme anyway. It was starting to come through, and I can't just remember the timeline now, but I think the first reading of that legislation wasn't too long after the Tynwald Hill demonstration. So we had the demonstration, we had the outrage from some of the locals, support from others, and then it got into the legislative stream. And as I said, that generated some pretty vicious comments from elected representatives, people who were there to look after the welfare of all their constituents.
Even one of our tenants.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Peter, for you, this is another day, another demonstration. Was it the fight the cause and here we are in the Isle of Man, or did it stand out in your memory cells as being a bit different? This Isle of Man, what on earth is going on?
Well, certainly we felt it was different in the sense that the Isle of Man community is quite small. It's neglected. People in the mainland UK just don't really. Isle of Man doesn't much register unless you go on holiday, maybe. So for us, it was really important to address an issue that was not on most people's radar, and that's why we felt that supporting the activists and supporters here in the Isle of Man were so important. It was all about solidarity, and we felt that if changes could be wrought in the Isle of Man, that would make life better for a lot of people. You know, end the kind of suffering, injustice, and suicides that the homophobic laws had caused. And obviously, you know, to uplift people's lives, that's a tremendously important thing, and that's been the motivation of my campaigning and that of Outrage.
Yeah, to make it better?
Oh, I think it's made a lot better, the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
You know, I think you've got the civil partnership, then we've got gay marriage.
Well, hang on. We were ahead.
And then you got equal civil partnership.
Well, we were ahead.
Yeah, we were.
But we went from 0 to 100%, and you were throwing things in left, right, and centre. Most of you, wasn't it?
But that, yes, of course.
Yeah.
That's what.
But the Isle of Man brought in male rape before the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
A man could not rape another man, a woman could rape another woman. Before the UK, we jumped ahead.
Okay, well, let's talk about that later. But
Can I just add
yeah,
in?
sure.
That was really inspirational.
Ah, right.
I can remember thinking to myself, how amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so much oppression, so much discrimination, so much suffering for so many years, and then suddenly all these tremendous positive changes, even in advance of the UK, England and Wales. So we were absolutely delighted, and we feel very proud that people, and very, very gratified and thankful that people in the Isle of Man did realise these changes had to come. And that they, as you say, leapfrogged England and Wales.
Well, let's talk about that more in the later sections. But the past, anything more from the past? 'Cause, I mean, you could, you know, what you couldn't do there, and the restrictions and anything else. I mean, the police we talked about slightly, but they had cameras and audio in and all sorts of things. They were going to the toilets.
They had cameras in public toilets, basically in the lights. They were a bit shady because you couldn't really see. The technology wasn't that good, believe me. And what I was told was you couldn't tell who these people were, and the police used dirty little tactics to get confessions, and you know, it wasn't just confessions from them. Who else have you been with? So they were building a list of people, you know. So it's just not just saying it was, hey, come on now, we know it's you there. Now, who else have you been with? Come on, tell us, give us your name. We've got all this.
It sounds like the Manx Gestapo or something.
Yeah,
like
these pink lists that the police kept.
Yeah,
were exactly what the Nazi Gestapo did in the 1930s in Germany.
This is what they were doing. They were going, who else have you been with? And trying to get all this information from these people by using scare tactics. And then, once you got the information, they were charged.
You also need to remember, I think, the leadership in the Isle of Man police at that time.
Was that Oak?
Was a gentleman who had served previously under James Anderton in Manchester, who was a very religious homophobe. And it was his philosophy, I think, that was imported into the Isle of Man from Manchester, and then applied to the gay community over here. So it wasn't everybody in the island, but there was an element within the police force.
Did you have any dealings with him in those days?
Yes, I did.
They hunted gays for sport.
Yeah, but what was your dealings? I mean, were you forthright with him?
They were fairly forthright, it's fair to say. Yes.
But
yes,
it was a Christian thing.
It's
right?
a Christian thing. Yes.
How many times does that come up?
Ironically, as far as I know, discrimination is not a Christian value.
No.
Okay.
Well, no, it was very unfortunate.
And James Anderton, for those who don't know or remember, he once said that gay men were swirling around in a cesspit of their own making.
Absolutely.
That was said by the Chief Constable of Manchester, who was supposed to protect and serve.
This was in the height of AIDS as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's just piling on pressure on people, you know, being gay, potentially having the disease, and then also being criminalised by the police.
I mean, it was horrible. Just touch on the AIDS bit again, and the authorities. You know, I remember having a fierce argument with the Isle of Man's medical officer of health about the Isle of Man needs to do something to advise people what to do on AIDS, on protection, you know, how to prevent HIV. And the official position, and he wouldn't budge from it, was we're not going to do anything on the Isle of Man until the first cases are identified. Anyone who knows anything about HIV knows once the case is identified, it's been in circulation for possibly 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. and it could be well into the community, but I could never get the authorities to recognise that at the time. So it wasn't just the police, it was the health authorities. And who knows how far HIV has spread within the Isle of Man because of the inaction on the part of the health service at the time.
Our group, he contracted HIV and they treated him like that. Production.
It's a sin. Yeah.
At Nobles.
Sterilise rooms.
Telling us you've got to dress up in all these weird clothes he wanted to wear, spacesuits he wanted us to wear. And we have to say that you're talking nonsense. I mean, they weren't up with it anyway. So the NHS here were a bit, I'm not being funny like everyone else, a bit behind.
But isn't this education and also
education,
fear to some degree?
Yeah. And basically, they treated the poor lad, and they ended up leaving the Isle of Man to go back to Manchester.
And I think quite a few going back to young people again. A lot of them left. And I think a number of them still do have treatment in Manchester, Liverpool, London, or whatever, rather than get into the health service here. But that stems from the ignorance, if you like, back in the 90s, when they refused to respond to it.
It was just put your head in the sand. I said in my last chat with you, I did a Manx Radio Sunday Opinion and had somebody with HIV. We recorded the interview and I played it out. And at the end of it, I was expecting loads of phone calls. Nothing. Nobody called at all.
Really?
They just didn't want to talk about it. It was quite surprising. I thought it was going to be outrage, if nothing else. But
and they sterilised the studio.
They sterilised the studio afterwards, after I recorded it.
That's how bad, yeah.
Welcome to Alman, Peter, again. Is this your second trip, or have you been a few times?
Second trip.
Wow, so it's a long time. Oh, we'll do the current in a moment. So that's the end of part one. Thanks for watching so far.